Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by COOP Ale Works. After 8 games, 14 days, we are back in Oklahoma City. Both of us are back in Oklahoma City inside of our pod studio. Gallo, it feels good to be back home.
It feels like we haven't seen each other in like 2 months, especially given the normal cadence of like the regular season and our normal like off season. Our podcast routine.
I know.
Doing those over Zoom was very strange.
It was odd.
It felt like 2020 all over again.
It did.
I'm happy to be back in our pod studio here inside the lovely Paycom Center.
Yes, it feels so good to be back. And between the 3 games in Salt Lake City that you covered, and you were also on air for a couple of those games as well, and between the 5 games that the Thunder played in Las Vegas in the middle of the desert in the summer. I don't know who came up with that idea. It's hot out there in the desert, in case anybody was wondering. It's been a lot of opportunities for these guys to get on the floor, get used to the Thunder, style of play, and also get to know each other a little bit more.
Paris, you were coming from the frying pan to the fire here, back to OKC with our 110-degree weather.
I thought I was going to get a little bit of respite coming back from Vegas to Oklahoma City, and I walked out of my door in Oklahoma City, and I literally started sweating instantly.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought I left this in Nevada.
Nope. Welcome home. Paris, I kind of wanted to get your take from being there on the ground in Vegas, because it's just so different watching on TV and not being in those buildings where there's a little bit more of that energy, the juice. There's fans of all different teams that are in the building. There are people that are just basketball crazed that want to be there, and then you're also getting to see the rookies and some of the other young guys who are trying to make steps forward in their careers. And I just wanted to see what kind of you thought of Vegas.
Vegas is so interesting because everybody is there for a little bit of a different reason, like you're mentioning, right? The rookies are there to get used to their team, meet their teammates, and learn their style of play. You've got returners who are there getting extra reps, building chemistry, showing off the work that they've been doing in the off season. And then you've got summer league invitees, right? Who are just scratching and clawing for a roster spot, showcasing what they've can bring to the table in hopes of making an NBA roster. And so it was interesting to see all of that different dynamic at play on the floor, and then off the floor it was also interesting to see what the crowd looked like, right? Yeah, you've got the summer league junkies like our Michael Cage and Steve Melton, our producer for our Valley Sports Oklahoma broadcast, who were just there, just soak it up and really they just love basketball. Right. So it was really cool to see them there. But then you've also got, front office members, and you've got coaches and just other teammates, returners and veterans who are there. So it's a really cool environment to be in. And for the Thunder specifically, how that played out, while everybody had different goals individually to get out of Summer League, you could tell that everybody put those second to what they were trying to accomplish as a team, which I think is really special and really rare.
I thought that the foundation was really laid in Salt Lake City. And I think that, we talked about this with Royce last week of let's develop a style of play so that by the time we get to Las Vegas, the lights are a little bit brighter, that we're playing like the team that we want to be. And it really felt like the ball movement, the passing, the help side defense, the talking, the communication. I mean, these are things that all came out in the 2 articles that Paris wrote, kind of bookending the Las Vegas portion of Summer League. You really honed in on some of those factors, which were really consistent throughout whether they won or lost the games. It was very nice to see these guys actually play to a team style and identity in an environment where historically the team is like one of the last things that people think about when, and this is really not, the Thunder has been one of the best over the years at being more team oriented at Summer League, but seeing it really shine through for the Thunder is very glaring in comparison to what you get when you look at a lot of other teams at Summer League.
And doing that over a very short period of time, right? These guys weren't together for, a month beforehand going over the style of play and leaning into the team ethos. They had only come together for about a week before getting out there in Salt Lake City. And then they used that time in Salt Lake City to get ready for Las Vegas. And you could really start to see when they were really put to the test. And one stretch that I highlighted in particular was those 3 games where it was a 1 possession game at the last second. And the game was decided by 3 points or less in those 3 games. The Thunder lost the first 2 of those games. And you could tell that they started to kind of grasp onto, all right, when things get hard, we have to come together more, right? Like we have to talk more. Everything that we said we want to do has to be elevated in those situations where the game is on the line. And then when that happened in that Sacramento game, Sacramento started to put a lot of pressure on them at the end. And the Thunder still maintained their lead and won the game. And you could hear after the game, like, yeah, it was a relief. But I think it wasn't a relief in the sense that they won, but it was a relief in the sense that everything that we've been talking about and everything that we've been working on trying to accomplish showed up. And it paid off.
Yeah, and these are the types of habits and skills that you need to start developing at an early age. I mean, you think about a guy like Josh Giddey, who's still 19 years old. I mean, he's going to be in those situations in NBA games coming up soon. I mean, just because these players are young doesn't mean that they're in the Thunder's world. They're going to be thrust into these situations. It's not like they're going to have their hands held come October and November. Like, they're going to be in the fire in those games as well. So that's why the summer league experience is so valuable. And like, at the same time, we don't want to take too much away from it because it's such a small like data point, but it's valuable in what we get down the line from that. And
at the end of the day, it is the first opportunity we get to see these guys in action, right? And in a real in-game situation. And I remember, we've both talked to Chet while he was in Summer League, and one thing that he said was, the worst thing you can do is go in here into Summer League and not get anything out of it, right? And so I think that's the mentality that every single person was taking when they went in there was, all right, I'm going to lean into everything that they're telling me to do. And this is my first taste of it. And so whatever happens, I'm just going to make sure that I take steps forward doing this. And when you do that as a collective, the entire group gets better as a whole. And that's what we saw.
Yeah. And I think, so, we've talked over the last couple weeks about the rookie class that has come in. And, I think Thunder fans after the draft, they did even more homework about who are these guys, who were watching YouTube clips. The thing that was cool to me is, we got first glimpses of those guys, but we also got fresh eyes on some players that have either been a part of the Thunder program or are newly into the Thunder program. I think like Eugene Omarui, this is a guy that played a handful of games for Dallas last year, played for a couple different colleges. Most Thunder fans probably didn't necessarily know him or his game. And the NBA and the Thunder is getting like this second look at a guy like him. Vit Krejci is another great example. He has surgery like 2 days after the season ends, and he comes back and he's got this athletic pop that we did not see from him at the end of last season. And so there are these little morsels that you can pick up that give you a second look at some of these guys and make you think, okay, well, this is interesting. There's more here. There's more layers that are continuing to be uncovered the more that you see these guys out in a competitive environment.
That was definitely one of my favorite parts of Summer League, was seeing these guys and kind of the strides that they've taken and what they're looking to showcase coming up into this season. We're going to take a short break here, and then we'll dive into some of those observations right after this.
COOP Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more COOP beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at CoopAleWorks.com.
Gallo, let's dive into some of these takeaways from Summer League. We have 8 games worth of intel now that we can break down a little bit. And I know we're not trying to take too much out of Summer League, but from a team perspective, there's really a lot that we could gather from these 8 games.
Yeah, I think the versatility, the fact that you have guys that can catch the ball off the rim and go. I mean, I don't remember many times where the Thunder was having to make outlet passes that weren't like advantageous.
Right.
If somebody got the ball off the rim, they just went and started initiating offense. That was everybody from, Josh Giddey, who's playing point guard, to Trey Mann, to Chet Holmgren, to Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, to Jalen Williams, Jay Will. So, like, there are all these guys that are going to have an opportunity to play alongside one another. And, I think that leads us to this idea of, can you play bigger sometimes? Can you play smaller sometimes? Can you play Chet Holmgren at the 4? Can you play him at the 5? Can you play him at the 3 some nights if you're really feeling frisky? What can you do with some of these guys in a more positionless world to try to amp up the physicality, to try to amp up the speed and the tempo? There's all sorts of questions that Mark Daigneault can ask himself from night to night now and come up with solutions for. And I think, it just reminds me of last season when there were some spot starts that the Thunder would throw out Derek Favors and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl in the starting lineup on the same night.
Right.
And, those types of options where you can say, okay, you know what, tonight we need the beef up front. Like we can do that, or tonight, hey, we gotta outrun these guys. And you can do that too.
A lot of options for the Thunder, and two things that came to mind when you were talking. The first is that versatility where everybody can grab a rebound and just take it up the floor themselves. That is not only beneficial for, obviously getting the offense going early, but it opens so much up because I'm thinking back to my playing days and when, as a point guard, I would be the one to get the outlet and take the ball up the floor. I'm looking up the floor to see who's running. Mm-hmm. If somebody that I know can handle the ball is getting the rebound and taking it up the floor, I know where I need to run immediately because I know that where they're going to be looking up the floor. So I know the spots that I would be looking for if I was point guard.
You know where they're supposed to be.
Exactly. And so you have that mindset of everybody who understands where the open spots are, who are actively looking for those open spots, and who know that, those opportunities might be available to them. So that's why you see so many guys out there moving without the ball, finding these sneaky backdoor cuts and these setting really solid screens. Have you seen Jalen Williams set a screen?
I have.
Those are incredible screens. He is so strong, and he knows that if he sets a good screen, it not only could open things up for his teammate, but also for him too. And so I think you get this collective mindset of everybody moving without the ball, but everybody also looking for each other. And that versatility really helps open that stuff up.
You mentioned the screening, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the physicality coming off of that. And so what we saw was a ton of charges taken by not just Jay Will, but some of his Thunder teammates as well, in addition to the hard screens. And then there's ways of being physical that aren't necessarily these hard collisions like we were talking about. Like, I think Robinson-Earl is a perfect example of this. That double-double that he had, I think it was 17 and 16.
Yep.
That was a masterclass in just being physical while playing completely within the rules, while just doing normal things like boxing out, being in the right position, being able to use leverage, being able to use lower body strength to get positioning. And, he got putbacks, he got easy finishes, he cleared out space for himself under the rim. All of those things that, are not flashy whatsoever, but are extremely productive.
Yes, and very, very, very effective in small situations, right? So Jeremiah is another guy who has clearly been working on his body during the offseason. And I was talking to Cam Woods after that double-double game, and I was like, what has stood out to you the most about JRE and his growth in this offseason? And he said the biggest thing is his defensive versatility. Yeah. Right? We saw a lot from Jeremiah last season in terms of the different spots that he was put in, playing the 4, playing the 5, guarding a lot of different positions. And him amplifying his body and amplifying his physicality allows him to play those positions and guard those positions even more fluidly, right? He's not getting screened as hard. He's not getting bumped off of his, cuts or anything like that. And the same thing happened with Josh Giddey, where we're seeing him finish a lot stronger around the rim now.
Sure.
He's headhunting those opportunities, knowing that. And it's crazy how working on your body affects your mentality because now you're oh, I can do that. And I'm going to actively look for those opportunities because I know that I can finish around the rim even if I get bumped.
Yeah. And just back to Jerry for a second. The very first Summer League game, what you're talking about stood out to me when he was defending Jared Butler from Utah. I mean, this is a 6'0" point guard who's super quick, came out of Baylor and was one of the best players on that team that, was in the Final Four. And just, the fact that Jeremiah was able to stay with him and defend him the way he was. And there were times it was oh, wait a second. This guy, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who was defending 5 men last year, is defending guards and 3s as his primary assignment. Yeah. It just goes to show the way that the Thunder is thinking about and utilizing these Summer League minutes of let's see. Yeah. Let's see what this guy can be and what this guy can do for us. Because if you can play Robinson-Earl as a switch defender 1 through 5, that's a totally different story. If you can play Jeremiah Robinson-Earl as a 3 alongside, 2 other big guys on the floor at the same time, what world are we in right now? It's a very different landscape that you can find yourself in because the NBA is all about matchups, executing, versatility, these core concepts that you can see that they're bringing in players that fit that mold. Ousmane Dieng is like a perfect example of that.
Exactly.
And then it's a matter of, can you develop these guys to actually be able to go and execute those things come game time?
Let's talk about another guy. We've talked Josh, JRE. Let's talk Aaron Wiggins, because he's a guy who got a lot of minutes in this summer league and who we saw a lot from as well.
He blew me away, just how confident he looked out there. I mean, last year I think that was something that stood out to us, as like, this guy had no conscience when it came to catching and shooting 3-pointers. Like, and that's a good sign as a rookie. You know, sometimes that phrase is used.
And he
like,
was so effective. You remember he shot like 18 shots and only missed one of them. His first 18 shots.
His 2-point field goal percentage was like crazy to start last year. And you know, he had some games where he really popped up. But what stood out in Summer League was just a really nice reminder of when he's in an off-ball position, and that's likely what he's going to be for this Thunder team.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't hesitate at all as a decision maker is so critical. I mean, it was catch and shoot, or it was catch and put the ball on the deck, or it was, you know, driver is coming towards me as I'm in the corner, I'm going baseline immediately. And like those types of instinctual basketball plays where you're not worried about, okay, well, am I really supposed to shoot this shot? You know, what are my percentages from this corner? Or like all of that work was done before, and knowing the types of shots that he should be taking, shouldn't be taking, and positions when he should be driving, and calibrating when guys are closing out on him. All of that is like at such a basic instinctual level that there's no thinking, it's just playing. And that's exactly what you need to have happen from role players like him.
And it's so funny because he told us in the offseason he worked on his shot. He worked with the Thunder coaching staff on, you know, really honing in on his shot. But it wasn't so that he could come back and just be like lights out shooter. It was so that he could be confident within the flow of the Thunder offense, find his spots, and I think also, to your point, just be more decisive, right? Yeah. If you're spending a half second thinking, oh, I don't know, he's kind of close, maybe I shouldn't shoot it, or I don't know, maybe I should put it on the floor, or maybe somebody is open, the half second is gone, and now no options are available. And so I think what he's been working on this offseason has led to that quicker decision making, which leads to him looking really, really confident out there on the floor, and also just being effective, able to do whatever is necessary within the flow of the offense at the time. And we saw that with the backdoor cuts he was making, the passes he was making, the finishes that he was finishing with, really, really confidently and decisive.
Yeah, and now you think about the hardest position to fill in the NBA is the wing.
Yeah.
Teams every year are looking for wings to be able to be a part of their core, to be a part of their playoff rotation, all that kind of stuff. The Thunder is rich in wings at this point. If you think about Darius Bazley, Lou Dort, who we'll talk about in a little bit, guys that are, you know, on the roster like Kenrich Williams, and, you know, there are players up in Ousmane Dieng and Jalen Williams. I mean, there are a plethora of wings at this point, and the fact that you can include Shea and Josh Giddey in that mix too because of their size means that you just have an incredible amount of length and size for position at that wing spot to mix and match, as we said before. And the fact that you can throw Aaron Wiggins in that mix is really, really huge, because you've got now backups for a guy like Dort. When you've got a guy that you got to defend for 48 minutes, you need somebody that can come in and be able to throw that fastball defensively and still be a plus player on the offensive end. And
he sets a great example for the other guys coming in, the rookies, the young players of, all right, here's what it looks like to play within the flow of the offense and to do what's asked of you, basically. Move without the ball, find your spots, find your gaps, find the cracks in the defense. And I just remember talking to Josh after a game, and he was like, and the ball movement, players moving without the ball. I mean, Wiggs is like the perfect example of that. K. Rich, those guys, they set great examples for these guys about what it looks like to play within the Thunder style of play. If we're talking about guards with size, I think Vit Krejci also fits into this category as well.
6'8", yeah.
And I bring up Vit because he looked so good this summer league. And that's saying a lot, because obviously he's been struggling with injuries throughout his entire time in the NBA, whether it was the ACL tear that he came in with or the ankle injury that he endured last season. And then he had a surgery this offseason, like you mentioned earlier. Right. But he used this offseason to just gain confidence back in his knee. And that athleticism, the pop that he was playing with, was so apparent.
You could see him like taking chances on the court that he wasn't taking at the end of last season. You could see him pushing the ball in transition. I think about that layup that he had to beat the quarter buzzer. You know, there are these moments where you're like, okay, this guy actually feels confident on his 2 feet.
Right.
In a way that he didn't necessarily last year. And that's not because he was like still injured or that there was like still something lingering that was like unsafe for him to play. Paris, you know better than anybody. It just takes time. It just takes time to feel 100% confident out there and feel like you can go absolutely to the wall with all of your energy, with all of your athleticism. And it also takes time to rebuild the muscles and those, you know, quick twitch moments and that type of thing.
The one thing that stood out the most in seeing Veet in action and then being able to talk to him like after practices and games, he was so happy.
Yeah.
He was just so happy. And it wasn't just because he was able to like be back out on the floor. I think he's feeling like himself again, right? Like he had kind of had so many setbacks, kind of had to hold himself back a little bit in terms of what he was able to do, what he felt comfortable doing. And he told me, he said, I feel 150% better. I feel so good. And on top of that, this summer, he had the chance to go home, which is the first time he'd been able to go home in 2 years. So he got the chance to go home. He's been working on his knee. He comes back. He feels so good. He feels so confident. And you could just see that in how he was playing, the joy he was playing with. And also, one other thing that really stood out was, especially in that last game against the Pelicans, he was directing traffic. He was very vocal. He was a leader. He was getting these guys who hadn't played in a game in Summer League yet in the right spots, helping them out, giving some advice. So it was really cool to see him just like step into that confidence, both as a player and as a leader out there on the floor.
And I think Thunder fans have the opportunity to maybe, again, like relearn who Veet Krejci was as a prospect. This is a guy that came to the NBA, I mean, was drafted by the Thunder as a point guard effectively. I mean, this is a guy that throughout his, you know, childhood and growing up was on the ball quite a bit. And so again, another 6'8" guy who can handle the ball and make decisions. You look all across the floor and it's players who have size that can make decisions quickly.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, Paris, though, you know, thinking about your experience with your knee injuries, did you ever get to a point where you felt like yourself again? And what was that like and how long did that last for you? I hate to ask you that way, but like, you know, and how long did it take to get to that point? And what was that like to finally feel like yourself again?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for context, in college, I tore my ACL 3 times. And the hardest part for me was just like going at it alone, right? Yeah. Like you're the only one who is, you know, struggling through quad sets, like just trying to flex your quad. You're the only one struggling to like walk up the stairs. That sort of mentality and being alone can really stick with you. But in terms of the physical element of it, you know, coming back and finally getting able to run, jump, play basketball again, I think you're separated from it for so long. Like it's a 9-month recovery to come back from an ACL tear. You're separated from it from so long that when you are cleared, when the doctor says, all right, yeah, you're full go, you're ready to go, I just stopped thinking about it. I was just like, yes, I'm going to go play some basketball again.
That's awesome.
But I think there's also an element of it too of like, you also have to get past okay, I'm going in for a full court layup right now in transition. If I get bumped or like falling, like those sort of things, you just got to learn to get past. And I give a lot of credit to Veet. And like you're talking about, he was out there like just playing hard, playing free. He took a couple of tough tumbles and hit the floor hard. And, you know, for me, in my experience, I'm like, okay, all right. But he like bounced right back up and he looked good. And so that's definitely, it's less about the physical, how I felt, and more about the mental what if. And it's getting past the what if. That's always the hardest part.
Was it harder? Were you able to break through like in a practice setting, or was there another breakthrough that had to happen in games?
It was always in live situations. So whether that was in practice or in a game, but like in live situations where everybody's going full speed, nobody's taking it easy on you. There's not practice dummies out there. It's like, no, everybody here is trying to compete and win. And like, you know, there are practices or scrimmages. So like a summer league environment would have been perfect for me too. But like, it was always in a live game setting where like, okay, I took a hard tumble, but I'm okay. Yeah. All right, we survived. We're good. And so the more and more you stack on top of those, the better I felt afterwards.
Well, the reason I asked you that question is exactly that, which is Veet got these games to go and shake that rust off, to be in those situations and be like, okay, I made it through that.
Exactly.
And he didn't have to wait until October for the preseason games to get that, and then you're on the eve and precipice of the regular season starting, and you might be in the rotation or be fighting to be in the rotation, and you're not quite feeling exactly yourself.
You want to come into training camp with that confidence,
right? And so that's another, like, as we're just talking about all the different reasons why Summer League is so important and why the Thunder takes it so seriously in terms of a tool and not necessarily like a results-based thing. This is one of the major tools that the Thunder can utilize. And
I gotta say, just as somebody who's been through knee injuries, I was so happy for Veet. I was like, I see it in your eyes. I get it. I'm so happy for you. It was great to see him back out there.
For sure.
All right. So those are our biggest takeaways from Summer League. Obviously, there was a lot to digest during that 2-week span, but the Thunder as a whole took a step forward, which was the biggest thing that they wanted to accomplish going into it. The Thunder never takes any time on the floor for granted or they always take it seriously. And so it was really cool to see from the start of Summer League, from the very first game in Salt Lake City to the very last game. One play before we get off of Summer League that stood out to me that really showed that the Thunder was just all about the team style of play. Kevin Kangu, the last addition to the Thunder's roster, in the very last game against New Orleans, he's obviously like trying to, carve out a spot. He's out there showcasing his game. He's a guard, really, really athletic. And it was the last minute of this game. Thunder was down pretty big at this point, but he steps in and takes a charge.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
on the line, buddy.
Like that is the epitome of what the Summer League has been all about sacrificing yourself and your individual goals for the good of the team. And so you could just see it clearly every minute of that Summer League. That was the goal.
I feel like that's a perfect segue to talk about the guy that we were just about to talk about.
Speaking of charges.
And speaking of, sacrificing yourself and your body. Dauntless Lou Dort.
Dauntless Lou Dort.
That was the title of the article that I wrote for OKCThunder.com about the Thunder signing Lou Dort to a long-term contract extension. That news came out while the Thunder was away at Summer League. We hadn't had a chance to talk about that yet. But Paris, I mean, we've been along this ride with Lou. He started the same year that you started in the NBA. And he went from... I'm trying to figure out who's had a more meteoric rise, you or Lou Dort, coming in here, fresh face right out of college, and now you're on TV, you're hosting podcasts, you're doing all the things that you're doing. Or Lou Dort, who just signed like a massive extension.
I mean, I think Lou's got it pretty good. I will say, thinking back to, because I remember I wrote the article, is called Who is Lou? That was the headline of the article, because everybody needed to know who this guy was when he came onto the scene. You remember, he was just thrown into the fire. Yeah. He was a two-way player at that point, thrown into the fire. I think it was the end of the Minnesota game, against Minnesota.
Dove on the floor to get a steal.
And he was only in the game for that 30-second stretch. That was it.
And you may remember that set up the heave from Steven Adams to Dennis Schroeder. Anyway,
and continue. No. And that's a great point, because then not maybe 5 games later, he was in the starting lineup. And so it's just like, this guy has risen to the occasion with everything that you give him. And we've heard Coach Dagnall talk about this, where the Thunder gives guys hurdles, right? Yeah. And you just see what they can clear. Because you never just want to put a guy in a box, put him in a,
achievable
give him a ceiling.
Hurdles also.
Yes,
right?
achievable hurdles. And you never just want to put a ceiling on a guy and just say, that is your role, that is who you are, and that is your identity as a player. This organization has just given Lou different achievable little hurdles, and he has cleared them. And I mean, cleared them with extra clearance, and clearly, because he's now just solidified his identity as this defensive juggernaut for this team, where I would feel so scared as a point guard if Lou Dort was guarding me. And he's also just become a really strong leader in this locker room too, and setting great examples for the guys.
And how about a developing offensive player who shot 44% from corners and 3-point range? He's obviously made huge strides in terms of his finishing at the rim, the ability to attack closeouts. You think about a guy that could be a huge part of the next generation of the Thunder in terms of that, one of those core pieces that helps complete your team, right? You've got top level playmakers in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and in Josh Giddey. You've got this promising young Chet Holmgren that you don't even know what he can be yet.
Exactly.
But you have somebody that grounds your team in a way in Lou Dort as well. And so that is absolutely critical to be able to have that sort of roster balance from, all of the different standpoints that Lou Dort brings to the table in comparison to some of these other guys. And it really helps give you a well-rounded group.
This makes me so happy because I always think about just kind of the stories of these guys and knowing his story from, growing up in Montreal Nord and then coming to the United States, but going to Florida first.
He played at prep school for 1 year in Jacksonville, Florida, I think.
Right. Yeah. And then that's where he learned English, basically. Right. That's where he learned how to speak English, and then played at Arizona State. Went undrafted. I just think about the rise that he has had and how often he must think about where he started.
Remember the Wilt Chamberlain pieces of paper with the number 2 and the number 11 on it?
We got to make sure that this picture is on
11 points of his career.
Yes.
Those were these incredible moments where none of us had any idea whether this was going to last with Lou Dort.
Right.
This is a two-way player that suddenly comes in. Well, he hasn't given up his starting spot. Since he got into the starting lineup against the Houston Rockets in January of 2020, he has not left the starting lineup.
Exactly.
This, I think, speaks to something that the Thunder does as well as or better than any other team in the entire NBA is they see people for what they can be and not just what they are. And that's really the crux of my article on the website about Lou and signing this contract extension is, the Thunder didn't necessarily see that he was going to be able to score 42 points in a game or that he was going to be able to hold a guy like James Harden to whatever it was, one of 18 shooting from 3-point range in a game, or he was going to be able to do, X, Y, and Z things. But what they saw were some of these core characteristics of who he was as a human being.
Right.
And that those types of things lend themselves to success at the next level and success as a human being. Yeah. Yeah.
And every guy up and down the roster has some of that too. And it's so cool to see when those things start showing up, and seeing them on the front end and what they show up on the floor on the back end. That's the cool element to this too, because you and we talk to these guys all the time in practices and in games. We know them on kind of a human level.
Right.
And to see Lou is just as selfless gets. He's a team first kind of guy. And it's so funny because he's kind of quiet. He's on the quieter side.
Yeah, definitely.
But when he explodes for 30 points or, he goes off for that 42-point game that he had, it's just so cool to see how the team rallies around him, but how he stays himself. He stays the same sweet Lou Dort.
I'll still never forget the outfit that he wore.
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
In Toronto.
Toronto.
He came into the press conference room and he was looking at himself I can't believe that I'm wearing this. This is silly. This is not me.
But he had the sunglasses on. He looked so cool. He definitely was icy.
Yeah, he looked really cool, but he had this sheepish smile because he walked in and he looked right at Paris and I was like, wait, you guys know this is not really how I'm just trying this out. I don't really know.
Yeah. But you looked cool, Lou. You looked super cool.
You looked super cool. And I bet you had a great time celebrating with family and friends this incredible news. Paris, was he one of there was a number of veteran guys that were in Las Vegas. What can you tell us about getting to see some of those veteran guys? We saw that you did a one-on-one with Shea. What was that like, just seeing all those guys together? Because I know it was Shea's birthday.
It was also Shea's birthday, which, first of all, that says so much about this guy that it's his birthday. He is the, leader of this locker room and of this team. He could have easily just been like, yo, it's my birthday. I'm not playing. I'm going to go hang out with, my people and my family. Yeah. But no, he was in Las Vegas spending time with his teammates, his new teammates, the rookies, getting to know the guys. And I'll say the one thing that stood out the most was how happy these guys were to see each other, right? You had everybody up there dapping each other up. Josh Giddey walked over to the sideline to take the ball out and he dapped up Kenrich. And I just immediately in that moment, I'm like, Kenrich knows exactly what's going to happen.
Also,
right
Kenrich kind of wants to check in.
Exactly.
Right now.
Exactly. No, Josh is like, hey, Kenrich, you know what's going to happen. Yeah. And so seeing they're all around the same age, right? And they all just genuinely love to be around each other. Yeah. And so in the back hallways, in the VOMs, it was so tough to get Shea to come over because he wanted to talk to his teammates and see his guys. And so it was just really cool. And everybody talked about it. they just have a lot of fun when they're around each other.
Yeah, I mean, this is it may sound trite, but the Thunder drafts people first and brings in people to this organization, and they can develop them as players.
Yes.
And the most important thing is the fact that these guys are representing Oklahoma City. They're representing the organization, and they're doing so with a very, very high degree of dignity and respect. And so that's what you want from all of these guys. And, as we're talking about Lou, there's no better example of a player and a person who is able to represent this team in this city.
Exactly. And speaking of drafting people and not players, a little bit of news that became official during the Summer League stint. All 4 of the Thunder rookies were signed to contracts. That is official, and we look forward to seeing what they're going to do based on what we saw the Summer League stint. So excited to see what they do this season.
Should be amazing. I mean, the Thunder, the lifeblood of the Thunder is layering in young talent and continuing to, generate value as an organization with these young players who come in through the draft. And so the Thunder had 4 draft picks this year, made 4 would seem to be, excellent picks. They're going to layer in, they're going to compete for playing time and roster spots. They'll be playing time with the Thunder. They'll be playing time with the Blue. We'll see how all of that gets shaken out. We'll see exactly how the Thunder's roster shakes out come October. And, it's great to have these new young players in the mix. And I know that they're excited to come to OKC and really dive headfirst into the team, the city, and the community.
Well, that is a perfect segue into what's on tap for the Thunder. We got to give you a little bit of a view into what is coming up down the line. So Summer League is over. Summer basketball, summer hoops has come to a close. And so now it's all about gearing up for training camp. So these guys, they're going to get to work, and they're going to be putting in the work getting ready for training camp. That is not going to be for a while. That's not going to be for a while. But before then, the schedule will come out in August, right?
Right. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that. We'll definitely do a podcast when the schedule comes out, just break down everything on that. And then, we'll be having some features on some of these Thunder players coming out for you in the month of August. We've had such a great opportunity over the last couple months, and then really things that we've gathered over the last year with a number of these Thunder players. They can really help provide some insight and just get you a little bit excited during sort of the down days of the summer when the NBA is sort of re-gearing back up. The players in the month of August in particular, they're going to be getting some well-deserved rest with their bodies. That this development season has a little bit of a hiatus before they come back in September, and they're ready to attack that pre-training camp workout regimen.
Yes, exactly. So you're going to want to stay locked on OKCThunder.com and at OKC Thunder on all social channels. Be sure to come back to the Thunder Basketball Universe podcast, where we'll keep you up to date on all of that stuff as well. We've got some really awesome stories and things to keep you up to date with.
And I want to add one more thing, which is when the players do come back into the market in September, kind of in full force, this is just a great reminder of the fact that the Thunder has tried to do everything that it possibly can to give back to the community over the last 2+ years with being in the middle of the pandemic. People who have been around here for a while remember that the Thunder for years led the NBA in community appearances, that the connection between the players and even just the organization with the book bus and Rumble and all of these different activations that they do with senior centers and schools. All of that is basically unmatched over the course of time here in Oklahoma City. Well, when the players come back and the fact that we're in a different place with the pandemic than we were, it is a great opportunity for some of those connections to, be more back to normal of what they have been, and so I'm really excited to see all of that come to fruition. And I know that people around the city are really excited to just have those bonds and connections reformed.
Well, the Thunder's rookie draft press conference was a great example of that, right? Like the guys, before they did their photo shoots, before they did the podcast with us, they were out there with the members of the community draft picks that the Thunder selected. They got a chance to be ingrained with this new city that they're going to be a part of. And so it's a really good example of that's what's first for this organization.
And I know you got something special coming on that.
Hey, I would keep it locked on OKCThunder.com if I were you.
just maybe keep your phone open to that.
Maybe not. I don't know. Might be something cool. You might want to see it for yourself. But until then, thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.